another edition of the We Seek Wisdom podcast. We are excited to apply Dr. Garlock's concept of phonohymnology, looking at the different archetypes of music and how they express the lyrics, and applying it to a gospel song that hopefully you all sing in your church. If not, perhaps you can request.
A lot of churches don't use it, but they should.
Really should. So which song are we looking at in this episode?
Spirit of God, descend upon my heart.
Good.
And I think we all need to be aware of the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
I think that a book that you and I were just talking about this morning by W. Philip Keller, where he talks about strength of soul.
Yes.
That we need to rely upon the Holy Spirit. He's the third person of the Trinity. And we need to recognize him. He's as much God as the Son and the Father.
Absolutely.
They're three in one. And so this is a song which depends upon him. And that all of us should be depending upon him.
Very much.
And this is probably one of the best hymns to sing, to glorify and praise the Holy Spirit, that third person of the Trinity. There are 4 stanzas for this hymn, and each one has a strong personal message that can speak to our hearts today. In fact, in our hymn book that I have in front of me, there are thrown only 3 stanzas. Actually, there should be 4. Why the fourth one got left out, but each one has something about the Holy Spirit that we need to know. Stanza 1 admonishes us to let him stoop to our weakness so that we can love him as we ought to love. Isn't that good?
Yes.
That's what it's talking about. Stanza 2 touches on every aspect of individual lives: our soul, our heart, our strength, and our mind. Stanza 3 deals with our natural human impatience that causes struggles, doubts, rebellions, and unceasing, or what we think is unanswered prayer. And then stanza 4 contains a searching metaphor that compares us to angels, so that my heart can be an altar and thy love the flame. We should go back and we ought to get another copy that has all those stanzas in it.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find all 4 stanzas and have
That
it
would
for
be
them
good,
on the screen.
yes, because they are, and all 4 of them should be there.
Yeah, I think I know where I can find that.
That would be good. Okay, thank you, Tim. I'm glad I can do that. George Crowley, from 1780 to 1860, boy, that's a long time ago,
Yes.
was a minister in the Anglican Church who moved to England, where he served in a smaller church near London, and then in a church that had been closed for over 100 years. His magnetic preaching was fundamental, conservative, and opposed to all forms of liberalism. At 74 years of age, he prepared and published Psalms and Hymns for Public Worship, a song book that included this text that we have just talked about here. So he was the one who wrote all these words. And so it's so interesting to have something that was probably written, let's see, how long ago would that be? 1780, 1980, 2000, 150 years ago.
Probably, yes, in that range.
And they still apply to us today. Because then Frederick Atkinson, who lived from 1841 to 1897, originally intended Morecambe, I guess is the way you say that word, for Abide With Me. That was the song that he wrote it for. And that was first published in leaflet form. The tune is named after a town in England, and as we will show, it is appropriately suited for the text that we're talking about here. It begins with just one chord for the first measure of Spirit of, and moves to a dominant 7th chord in first inversion to highlight the fact that the Holy Spirit is God.
Yes.
So if you're looking at the music that you have in front of you with all the words on it, you see how the tonic chord, the C chord, this is what the key that the song is in, it repeats that chord for Spirit of, and then for God it moves to a different chord. At first, a major minor 7th chord in first inversion, and back to emphasize the Spirit of God to descend upon my heart. And then for descend upon my heart, we notice that we have all four voices have good melodies, and measures 3 to 4 have the soprano and bass moving in parallel tense to portray descend upon my heart. Isn't that interesting? You got the bass, the soprano, which is a tenth. And is that a hard interval to grasp?
No, it's very common in part writing, and it's just such a lovely sound.
So actually, it's a third spread out to an octave, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it acts like a third, but it's wholly it's in a tense between the bass and the soprano.
Right.
And it paints the words "descend upon my heart" that is what we're asking God for.
Yes.
And the measure 5 has a contrary motion between the bass and the soprano for "wean it from earth." Isn't that interesting? Wean it from earth. It has the bass coming from the A up to the E, and the soprano coming down from the C to the G. Isn't that interesting? So that paints the words "wean it from earth," and then so what does it do from there? Through all its pulses move. So that duet between the soprano and tenor continue for measures 9 through 12. We get to when we get to all of its pulses move. You get the bass staying on a pedal there for the 4 notes in measure 7. That goes to the tonic chord back in measure 8. But then you get the tenor and the soprano in those 2 measures, all its pulses. The soprano and the tenor become a duet. And then the alto moves up to the F sharp. So it goes actually into the key of G at that point. Through all of its pulses move. Again, it's painting the words. It's amazing how that composer, Atkinson, was so sensitive to the words that he painted the words that way. And then when you get to measures that go on further, measures 13 through 16, the strength and color to make me love thee as I ought to love. You notice how the bass goes from a C on up to the F and keeps on coming up as the soprano comes all the way down. So they meet in that measure. Let's see what the measure is that here. This is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Third measure, 13.
Yep, 13.
They come together there as the soprano comes down and the bass comes on up to put it all together. So they add strength to make me love as the by contrary motion between the bass and the soprano that bring the hymn to a fitting closing with a melody on the 5th instead of the root of the tonic chord. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, unusual, but very beautiful.
That's Just As I Am does that.
Yeah.
But that's unusual that this composer. The music characteristically matches the meaning of the lyrics of the other 3 stanzas as well as it does the first stanza. This is a credit to both the lyricist and the meter he employed for the words, so that the composer's music can fit each one as well.
Yes.
I've had some people write to me. I had a lady who wrote to me several months ago, and she had poems that she wanted to be set to music. And as I looked at it, I said, "Well, send me your poem." And I looked at it. She had no meter to it. It was just open poetry.
Sure, yeah.
It was free verse.
Yeah.
And so I wrote back to her and said, "Look, you're a good poet, but being a lyricist is something else."
Yeah.
And a lyricist is think of the meter that he's working with, iambic, pentameter, whatever the meter is, so that a person who's going to write the music can make it fit. Because your songs, your poems will not fit into music. So thank the Lord for he gave you the gift of poetry, but don't try to set them to music. And she wrote and thanked me for that. That God gave her one particular gift, but you couldn't cross that gift over to another thing. So I think that God has helped me as a composer as we look at my songs, which we're going to be doing as well as we continue, that I always think of the meter of the words. And that's why we use the Hebrew parallelism. We'll be talking that along the way too, that you have a phrase, and then it's either a continuation of that phrase, or it's a contradiction, or it's something else, that an explanation, so that it all fits. So that when Florine, my wife, was writing that to actually paint the words, she could actually make it match the words as well in the way she worked the harmony.
Yeah.
So
Good.
that those are gifts that God gives to us,
Yes.
and He wants us to use for Him.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so I have to thank the Lord for the gifts He gives me, and He lets me use it. Just like this composer did, took Dix's writing and said it.
Good. And I trust you've found this edition of this podcast insightful and encouraging as we looked into this beautiful hymn of worship. And if so, please click that subscribe button. It is completely free. There's no cost at all. And if you liked it, please click that thumbs up. That helps get the word out here on YouTube. But also, you can spread the word by letting family and friends and folks at church and whomever you come in contact with that you think would also receive encouragement from these podcasts, let them know about it. And they can go to weseekwisdom.com and find these podcasts. Thank you so much, Dr. Garlock.
Let me add one more thing.
Yes, please.
The Spirit of God descended upon my heart is arranged for trombone choir.
Oh,
I did it with my trombone choir years ago.
nice.
And it is recorded. I believe it's on an album, a CD that they have at Majesty Music. And if they don't have the album or the CD, you can get it. I'm sure they can put it on a way that they can do it.
Yeah,
How did
some
they
way.
do that?
Oh, there's several different ways, but I'll tell you what, I will see if I can find either the recording or links or something. And if I come across those, I will definitely link to that down here in the description so that you can go and listen to this
I
song.
believe the CD was called For All the Saints because
Sounds
it was a
familiar.
number of my arrangements,
Yes.
and the Spirit of God was one of those.
Was one of those. Good.
And Eternal Father, Strong to Save
Oh,
us
that's
their
a
way, and When
powerful-
Morning Gilds the Skies. They were all there. In
Good.
fact, we recorded it in Indianapolis with
Nice.
all professional trombonists.
Yes.
I had 8 of them.
Oh, wow.
And those poor guys, they were playing all day long, and they were wearing out. But so that they can, they can't get the album if the CD's not available anymore. They can get the music and listen to it.
Yep. I will look for that and provide a link in the description if I'm able to find it. And thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. We'll see you for another episode. Usually these come out about once a week. So thank you so much for spending time with us, and we will see you soon.